Oh, I'm not used to doing these sort of things. Hello, my name is Guy, and well, I'm actually. Oh, it's difficult to say this. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to say it. I am. So hard. I'm a mind flayer. Yeah. Wow. That was easier than I thought. Ooh, oh, how difficult must it be if I was a kobold? Hello and welcome to today's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy, and today we're asking the question, what kind of monster are you as a game master? Now, this video was very much inspired by several of my other friends on YouTube who've done similar kind of videos, but I got to thinking, what really makes a good GM? What really makes a great GM? And is there a scale that we can apply? Well, I thought, as a matter of fact, there is a scale or two that we could apply. So this is my personal take on where you fit within the role of GM. Are you a kobold? What's a kobold GM, and is a kobold GM better or worse than an orc GM? Or what about a drow GM? What about the Mind Flay? Or perhaps you're a dragon GM. Oh, I'd like to be a dragon GM, I hear a lot of you saying, but I'm probably more like an orc. Anyway, so that's what we're going to be unpacking in today's video, and this is about an honest, mature, serious reflection about you and your skills as a GM, wrapped up in a bubbly, friendly, furry, scaly, hairy, slimy, fire-breathing package. Now, when we look at the first one, what makes a kobold? The kobold GM. Now, the kobold GM I see as being someone who's fresh, who's new to the game, who's new to role-playing in general, who is unsure of their power and their skill, and everything's so shiny and I don't know where to start, and they're easily distracted by new books that have come out, and we're going to try this new class, we're going to try this new setting, we're going to try this, they're just everywhere. Problem is their stories generally cover a small territory. They're simple stories, they're not these elaborate things, or unfortunately sometimes they try and include all the shinies, in which case then they're too elaborate. So if you're a GM who's new to the game and you are still in this phase, and let me tell you right now, all of us go through this phase. I remember when I first started GMing, well, in those days we only had the one book, we didn't have much choice. But I tell you, even today I walked past, this was in a store here in Japan, I walked past the Monsters Manual 2nd edition, that white-covered monstrosity, and I looked at that and I went, oh, shiny. I went right back to being a kobold GM who was absolutely in love with that book, and I wanted to use everything in one encounter because it was so amazingly cool and it was just awesome, and I didn't really know how Thacker worked, but that doesn't matter, just throw it in there, just get it in there, and like crazy hair, just do it, just go mad and just include everything. Kobold GMs have fun, and then they need the support of their fellow pack. They're not independent operators. They need their players to give them feedback and to encourage them. If you are a kobold GM, you've got this most amazing adventure ahead of you. You're going to unpack and grow and level up and get more, and just all of this is going to change until eventually you are the Grandmaster and you are still unsure, easily distracted, your stories are probably going to be a lot more complicated, but in the very same vein, it's still going to cover a small scope of what is potentially out there. And you are still going to want all of the shinies. We just have more stuff to do as you've leveled up. So the Kobold GM for me is the new GM, is the beginner GM, the individual who is starting out, who's just going to be amazing one day. The Orc. The Orc GM is a GM who knows what he's doing. He or she has learned that they are in charge, and the only one who's going to bring any kind of power challenge to them is themselves. They're GMs who come up with crazy ideas. We're gonna go on a flying airship and have underwater adventures, and we're gonna have aerial combat in the same combat, and we're gonna do all this stuff. We're gonna have sieges, and we're gonna use miniatures and figurines, and they've got big plans. It's just all of the stuff is just there, and we've got a giant hunting ground. We can go anywhere on this map. But you can't go outside of the plan. Once the plan is in action, you need to stay there. So the Orcish GM, I think, is where a lot of GMs are at the moment. They're in that space where they're in command of the rule systems. They know their plan. They have an adventure plan worked out. They've got their NPCs. They've got their maps. Everything is ready. They're hungry to roleplay. They enjoy being the GM. They're not timid. They're not worried about being the GM. They know where they are as a GM. However, like an orc, there is sometimes not too much flexibility when it comes to the story. But we've got the plan. Why would we deviate from the plan? Deviate from the plan and I will kill you. Yeah, sometimes GMs who are still in the orcish phase tend to railroad quite heavily because there isn't a lot on the outside and there isn't a lot of improvisation that can happen. This is not a bad GM. This is a GM who will run a great game, who uses adventure modules and runs them beautifully, and is really meticulous about the kind of world that they create. If you are an orcish GM, you are a GM who's already in a great position, so don't take this as being, oh, you're just an orcish grunt. You are not. You are the lifeblood of our community. You now have the awesome opportunity, much like the Kobold, to now take your magnificent power and form it into something different, into something bigger, into something bolder. Or perhaps not. Maybe boldness is not what's needed. Perhaps you need to be more like a Drow. The Drowish kind of GM is the confident GM, the GM who once was an orc and who realizes that using a hammer or a double-bladed axe might be beautiful and it might still serve a purpose, but poison and intrigue, convoluted plotting is actually the way to go about it. The Drow GM is a GM who has layer upon layer within their narrative. There's more to it than just go and kill the big bad at the end of the dungeon. This is where the dungeon is unseen and the players don't even know that they're in it yet. This is where you start to flex your literary skills as a creator and you start to have these vast, complex webs of deception that are woven around the player characters. You weave their stories into the main plots. You use lots of puns and you kind of sometimes overdo it, perhaps a little bit with being the evil plotter. Yes. However, the Drow GM can also fall into the trap of only having one focus. I'm very good at running political games. I am a master of deception. You won't know where you stand in my games, no. Sadly, not all games need to be these incredibly in-depth political intrigues or these complex relationship type of stories. This is a great GM already. This is a GM who can understand their player characters, who incorporates their player characters into their narrative, into their world. This is a GM where you leave the table going, that was an amazing session. I want to get in. I want to get back for some more. The challenge that the Drow GM faces now is taking your game to the next level. By that, I mean you need to be able to sometimes not have complicated, obfuscating plots that are hidden behind mirrors and illusions. Sometimes straightforward is the answer. You need to go back to your orcish roots, as vile as that may sound. There are times when you need to mix it up and have a fun scenario where it's not all doom and gloom and seriousness. The Drow GM for me is a GM who is focused on telling intricately wonderful plots and doesn't really have the ability to shift out of that mode. They're not as agile or as adaptable as they could be. This leads us to the fourth tier, the fourth level, the fourth value, I suppose, the fourth iteration that you can be. That is the Mind Flayer. The Mind Flayer is someone who doesn't just come up with plots, but who comes up with the most twisted, convoluted scenarios and locations. Nothing is beyond the realm of this particular GM. The Mind Flayer has the capacity to create adventures inside the hearts of beasts and make it feel as if it's absolutely integral to the story, and that the characters themselves, their backstories, the Mind Flayer GM doesn't just take the backstories of the characters. The Mind Flayer takes the stories of the characters and makes them into something more. They take the backstories and they forge out of those even more complicated plots, even more complicated stories that the players want to pursue. The player has written down a backstory. Yes, the Drow will use it against them. The Mind Flayer will make sure that it grows and blossoms into something that appears to be the main plot, and yet at the very heart of it, it is still part of the Mind Flayer GM's story. Mind Flayers are multi-dimensional GMs. That means today you want to play World War II, tomorrow you want to play Greece, tomorrow, the day after that, you want to play in Harry Potter. The day after that, well, why don't we all just pretend to be cats? The Mind Flayer GM is the GM who can adapt to almost any kind of scenario and setting, and who can step into a setting that they've never played before. Oh, Warhammer 40k? Sure, no problem. Give me 5 minutes to read up on the lore. I'll absorb it and turn it into my own, and it'll feel as if I have owned it forever. The Mind Flayer is someone who can pull on the player's expectations, understand what it is that they want, and then give it to them in ways that they couldn't even conceive. Sometimes the Mind Flayer gives it to them as they've asked for it, and that blows their minds. There's no deception, there's no ropes, there's no strings attached. No. You asked for it, you got it. It's all yours. I'm not going to stop you from taking it. Of course, if your conscience stops you from taking it, well, that's your choice, not mine. Mind Flayer GMs are the ones that have got to the point where anything that they touch seems to be this amazing story, and that they can sit down and effortlessly just create, as if there was no barrier to their creative faculties or their creative dimensions, or just how far you can push them. They have lots of stories going on that all seem to be completely irrelevant, and yet somehow all link together and all have deeper meanings that the players just want to explore. The challenge with the Mind Flayer, however, is that sometimes Mind Flayers get to the point where they feel that nothing is a challenge for them anymore, and as a result they are lords of their domain to sit back and wiggle their tentacles at others. I'm not going to GM today. You don't deserve my GMing. Go and play with the Drow if you want something light. The Mind Flayer can become stuck in the system that they have enjoyed using. The Mind Flayer can, after a while, fall back on stories that they know worked very well in the past, and as a result don't push themselves and don't grow. Now, to me, a Mind Flayer is a GM who should really be trying to go further. they've reached the point now where any player that they encounter, to a large degree, is going to sit back and go, this is it. This is what a GM is all about. This really is the epitome of GMing-ness. And there are lots of Mind Flayer GMs out there. Not a lot of them, but there are a few out there that you can find, and that when you do find them, you just want to play all the time with them. However, none of them stand up and can hold a candle to the very final type of GM that is out there. And that is the Master, the Dragon, the ultimate power within the narrative role-playing space. These are individuals who are masters of their craft. They know the rules, they can cite page numbers if they really wanted to, but they don't bother because they are confident in what they know. They don't just know one system either. Oh, you want to play this, you want to play that, you want to play the next thing. They're all the same at the very core, and I know them all. There is no uncertainty in this creature. This GM is in total control. They don't get flustered, they don't get knocked over by players doing crazy things. They adapt and slide and shift and change. The story advances and evolves as the players interact with it with such an elegance, with such an ease, that the players never feel as if there's a momentary pause in how this particular GM tells this story. They have no limits. They will go in every and all directions. They will cause players to have emotional responses to the game that are not even part of their character but themselves. Players will break down in tears, will burst out in laughter, and will be thinking about the games and the stories and the experiences for years to come. There are no constraints when dealing with a Dragon GM. The Dragon GM will take you wherever your heart desires and will bring you back again, holding your hand all the way there and all the way back, at the exact same time, ripping your heart out through your chest, and you will come back for more. This GM is the type who is so captivating, who is so intrinsically entertaining, so marvelously meticulous in terms of how their narratives work out, that at the end of a session it feels as if you've been part of a film or a book rather than role-playing. You forget that you're even role-playing. You're just existing in this space. That's the power of a Dragon GM, is to take you as the player away from everything, but truly away, so that by the time you look up you go, oh, it's 4 hours gone already. How did that happen? I want more. The Dragon GM is the crowning achievement of game mastery, and it is something that I think we should all strive for. Whether you think you are a dragon, or perhaps a Mind Flayer, maybe just a Drow, perhaps you are in the legions of the Orcs, maybe you're a fresh, plucky young Kobold ready to take on the world. Whatever you happen to be within the game mastering space, I have this to say to you. You are a game master, and you have donned the mantle of such, and it is a heavy cloak to bear. You have to call and fight against your players not only on the battlefield, but also in terms of running the game. Players who've got more experience than you do will try to countermand you if they're not good players. You've got logic to fight against, physics, gravity, geography. Everybody's an expert on something, and you're always going to be making a decision that someone can refute you on. That is the path and journey that a GM is going to be taking. You are a true storyteller in one sense, form or another, regardless of what someone might say. You are taking the sword and the shield into battle, and you are on the front lines. GMs are rare, and we need more of them. We need people who are willing to step forward, but who are willing to step forward as true GMs, not as impersonators. Oh, I'm a player, but I'll GM if we need to. That's not a GM. A GM is someone who, well, I enjoy playing, but I enjoy the intrinsic difficulty of herding a bunch of cats into a dungeon and then keeping those same suicidal felines alive until they can get to the very end where they discover that it was all the princess's fault. However you do it, whatever you do it, if you are a game master, I salute you, and I say welcome and thank you for being part of our amazing hobby, and for ensuring that others, hopefully, enjoy our hobby as well. Until next time, orcs, kobolds, drow, ithilids, dragons, I salute you.